Please note that the percentages in these pie graphs do not add up to 100% because the math was done by a woman.
So, the height of feminist intellectualism in 20th century entailed Virginia Woolf in her feminist essay A Room of One's Own writing down the words, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." And I am happy to announce that today we, as strong, independent, emancipated women with our own money in our own rooms, sit down and honor her by creating classical masterpieces such as She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and Don't Worry Darling. This video is going to be my apology letter to Virginia Woolf, among many other things. The last time I visited Feministopia, I tried to phrase myself as diplomatically as I could, holding back some of my opinions and levels of frustration and trying to sugarcoat my anger with logic and reason. But lately, the abundance of woke media succeeded its purpose and made me want to unleash my inner woman, unfiltered, overdramatic, overly opinionated, emotional, and loud Karina. And since I am woman, hear me roar even louder about how much I hate modern feminist media. On the serious note, ironically enough, it takes a lot of balls to so passionately oppose something that claims to be rooted in philosophy that you yourself very much value deeply and dearly. It's becoming increasingly harder to find the balance and objectivity in articulation when your passionate antagonism of something contradicts your own personal belief system. But the biggest irony is in the counterproductive nature of the fact that Hollywood screwed up so bad that the biggest favor I could do modern feminist media is to tear all of it to shreds, which I will do with honor and dignity. Well, at least I'll try to. Which drives me into a wall since on the one hand as a woman I feel an obligation to support my gender through and through, but on the flip side it all comes at a cost of my own integrity, as it entails me supporting the utter circus and garbage Hollywood has been delivering lately. And unfortunately, a lot of that garbage is provided by women themselves. Sorry, Virginia. This time I won't only be diving into the writing of female characters, but also female directors and writers who write those female characters, and their tone-deaf attempts at girl-bossery. But, you will say, there are just as many, if not more, terrible male filmmakers, but you chose to target exclusively women. That's straight-up misogyny. Well, you might be correct. Maybe this is me coming out as an ultimate pick-me girl, which itself is a term rooted in misogyny since it robs girls from the ability to express opinions that differ from what society deems stereotypical, and further reduces them to a male attention-seeking superficialist. Or maybe this is me acknowledging the fact that because of society's deep-rooted passive-aggressive misogynistic tendencies, especially when it comes to professionalism, unfortunately women are expected to fail, be unprofessional, and incompetent a lot more often than men. Therefore, when this rare phenomenon, such as Hollywood letting women create films, occurs, a particular group of women are given a huge influence, power, potential, money, and ability to represent their entire gender in the eyes of millions. Their responsibility is greater than any man's in the industry since the stigmas regarding women are a lot harsher. Their responsibility is greater than any woman's in any other industry since the stakes are a lot higher since the amount of media exposure is incomparable to any other. So when these women take this privilege, $200 million budget, and a humongous influence over how their gender is going to be represented to the entire rest of the world, and use it to create She-Hulk. What is a greater way to fight for feminism than a 5-hour-long demonstration of just how insufferable and incompetent we can be, I guess. If women keep delivering garbage or tone-deaf quote-unquote feminist mainstream media, it will further feed into and solidify the sexist stereotypes regarding female shallowness. Even though me supporting them might benefit feminism today or tomorrow, in long term, it will probably do more damage than good. And this is not me saying that there are no good female filmmakers or storytellers in Hollywood. There are abundance of them. But, unfortunately, you almost always come across them in indies or underdog films, overshadowed by select few that scream much louder and much more obnoxiously, hence are chosen to be given mainstream attention. And so, for every Greta Gerwig, we get 5 Elizabeth Bankses and Jessica Gauss. I do not oppose women. I oppose shitty filmmakers, and when those shitty filmmakers are intentionally or unintentionally hurting some little girl's chances of being taken seriously in the industry in some 20-something years, I will pretty much go feral.
For those of you hissing at that joke, it should be noted that that joke was written by a woman. So now you don't know what the hell to do, do you?
So in my last video, I concluded that if you want to write great characters, you need to make them humans first and women second. In real life, most women face two types of struggles. The ones that have something to do with us being women, and the ones that have nothing to do with our gender. For Ellen Ripley, Sarah Connor, Leia Organa, femininity and maternity are very important, but their humanity is more so. And it's not like you cannot base the character's story on gender-specific conflict that takes roots in misogyny or patriarchal system, but in order to achieve that, you have to dig much deeper and explore darker journey that will be believable and big enough to serve as the main conflict. Things like, I get catcalled on the street is a huge problem that women face on daily basis, but it's barely the conflict of our lives. Believe it or not, if you already start off as a pretty, rich, smart, healthy person with a solid career and education, as much as it might frustrate you, Miss Schalk, your social and economic standing still make you one of the most privileged people in the world, despite you having a hoo-ha. And this is one of the biggest problems I have with modern feminist media, where the best way they can think of to represent feminism is by gaslighting us into believing that some privileged American woman's first world problems, like having trouble finding a hookup or not being taken seriously at her job while twerking during working hours, is something that we should view as pinnacle of misogyny somehow. No, Jessica, I know you're bad at geography, but look at the map. Okay, maybe in 2030 you'll get to make feminism all about your dating life problems, but we're not there yet. Sit down, read Virginia Woolf. But when filmmakers do not choose to project their first world problems into their female protagonists, they downright make up fictional misogynistic scenarios and problems that they write off as metaphorical, like some sort of meta commentary about today's patriarchal society that should reflect our struggles. But I don't know about you, but I don't understand how my incel husband named Harry Styles kidnapping me, tracking me, strapping me onto some machine, and putting me in a virtual reality where I'm a happy, loving housewife against my own will should somehow be metaphorically indicative of anything that I or any woman have to go through in our lives ever. These types of projects almost always start off with an ambition to be an eye-opening, thought-provoking meta-feminist cult classics, but along the way, that ambition almost always morphs into a 2-hour-long man-bat campaign in order to satisfy LA feminists' ever-growing personal vendetta against every breathing man on the planet. But when Hollywood runs out of the ability to think up some terrible fictional alternative realities to push and celebrate their idea of feminism, they take inspiration in history, and by that I mean completely rewrite it in order to make a female group of killers and enslavers out to be heroic girl bosses, because who cares about morality when you can have girl power, right? And you're racist and misogynistic if you don't support a whole ass movie that spends its entire runtime romanticizing and portraying female enslavers and criminals as heroes. Great work, women. A way to go. Virginia is doing cartwheels in her grave. She's just that proud. These types of things make me believe that people who write this stuff have no idea or competence, no matter what they would like you to believe. Because when it comes to representing a female struggle, instead of actually depicting and digging deep into women's realistic journeys, the closest thing they do to acknowledging misogyny is either fictional and made up, or vaguest of lines like, I don't even know what that means. I don't know, maybe it's my non-American self, but in my daily life, I rarely go around all of my day like, you know? I don't care what your gender is, if anger and fear are the baseline of your existence, please call up a psychologist. But it's all fun and dandy since women who worked on these movies and shows now can easily guilt trip you into consuming their work using the sexism card. And the most heartbreaking part of this is indeed the number of filmmakers that happen to be female who are guilty of doing the same exact thing recently. If they complain as much as they can about how disturbed they are by patriarchy, both visually and verbally, in their movies or shows or even outside of them, somehow it's gonna benefit feminism more than them creating something actually valuable and worth watching. I don't care. Leave me alone until you can provide me with female characters and creators I would want to look up to instead of the ones that I wouldn't even bother myself to look down at. In my opinion, the woman who makes the biggest difference is the one that proves to be great not by statements but with actual work, and whose gender is mostly irrelevant in the conversation. The actual great filmmakers do not ever have to rely on the oppressed gender card inside or outside of their work, since they should have enough faith in their own professionalism to not need it. Make as many feminist movies as you want. This is not me opposing pro-feminist media, but make sure to make the movies first and feminists second, please. And from my own experience as a woman, I can guarantee that if you actively start to see and think of yourself as a victim, no matter how validated you might be in it, more defeated, petty, and numb you will become until your anger and frustration consumes you to the point where you start to see misogyny in every negative experience you come across in life, which is paralyzing and completely counterproductive, considering that in reality negative experiences are just a normal human occurrences regardless of gender. So if you isolate yourself from relating to others thinking that humanity is conspiring against you, you will never feel an ounce of joy. And some are so consumed by their victim mentality that they themselves start to believe that every criticism aimed at them or their work must have some ulterior motive of taking down the women of power. When in reality it's not the patriarchal society, not some incel gathering, but just their unprofessionalism that does it. And unsurprisingly, this type of narrative bleeds into their own creations that is more than apparent in most of feminist media today. But how can something like victim mentality become so mainstream and romanticized? Well, the year is 2017 and month is October. Ronan Farrow cast as journalistic magic and Hollywood is never going to be the same again.
No, I'm just kidding. We don't hire women. Sarah.
I think that never before or since has Hollywood ever been as vulnerable and exposed as during Harvey Weinstein fiasco. Overnight, the industry went from sparkly, trophy-armed, God-thanking, ovation-receiving self-celebration to black-clad, devil-damning, ovation-receiving self-celebration.
God, Harvey Weinstein.
I'm looking at you, Meryl Streep. Suddenly, Hollywood's golden facade became see-through. During 2018's Golden Globes, all of Hollywood, including women, in order to deflect from their very public track record of celebrating, thanking, and unironically worshipping one of the Hollywood's biggest criminals,
Invite for a young girl moving to Hollywood. I'll get live with it. Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party in the Four Seasons downtown.
clothed in black, and instead of admitting to their own contributions to the situation, painted themselves as pitiful, vulnerable, poor creatures supporting victims that they never bothered to support before it was made to be profitable. Hence, insert Hollywood's biggest and most reliable PR tactics. In Hollywood, being a victim is profitable. That's why every time some celebrity makes the headlines with the saddest, most heartbreaking stories like, "Oh no, I bought $1 million mansion and I have to work now," it always magically coincides with their upcoming memoir or show or movie or something. And in Hollywood, this happens quite often, and specifically for women, since movements like Me Too made it impossibly easy for women to claim anything misogyny related and automatically be backed by millions because being a woman today is synonymous with proof. Like that infamous time when Olivia Wilde, our feminist icon, built a PR opportunity on the grounds of the actual abuse story and a victim by inserting herself into a tragic situation with false claims and stories. Or Jennifer Lawrence being silent about being paid $8 million more than Chris Pratt in Passengers, but a few years later when she earns $5 million less than Leonardo freaking DiCaprio, it's suddenly sexism and we are all supposed to feel sorry for her. And the worst thing is that actual victims in the industry are being continuously overshadowed by those who use the victim status and patriarchy as a career furthering tool. But at this point you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with movies? Well, it's important because, as it turns out, this victim tactic is not exclusive to singular people. Over time, the industry realized that if they take that PR tool and integrate it into their shows or movies or stories, this will make the headlines and promote their media, no matter the value of the product itself, just like it does for singular celebrities. And that's one of the causes of influx in feminist media, where writers throw at the wall as many sexist scenarios they can think of, because if you call out misogyny in Hollywood, it will not go unnoticed, even if it's through a fourth wall. But you're right if you think that storytellers' intentions are not that important as long as the product itself is valuable. But as we have already established, when it comes to feminist Hollywood, that's rarely the case. The reality is that most of these storytellers do not create these shows or movies because they're passionate or even interested, but simply and only because whining about how hard it is to be a woman in today's society is trendy, hard to criticize, and very much marketable. Therefore, at the end of the day, you get writers that are not only incompetent in writing average female experiences, but also at the same time do not acquire passion, interest, or desire to compensate for that incompetence. But what has bothered me the most, indeed, is the question, how? Since the women who have delivered most of this tone-deaf content are not only historically less likely to be hired in the industry due to their gender, but also professionally prove themselves to be unfit for their jobs. Their inability to create valuable content alongside with their gender should put them at very low odds of ever being hired for such big projects, but nevertheless this is reality. You would think that to be employed in such a misogynistic and male-dominated industry, these women should not only be knowledgeable, but also more so than men, whom are historically more favored in these positions. But this is not the case, is it? Well, upon research, I stumbled upon a very fresh New York Times article regarding the Me Too movement that for my own dismay backed up my own suspicions. This article is based on interviews with more than 24 industry leaders, including top studio executives, agents, activists, marketers, and producers, who spoke on condition of anonymity to candidly discuss the current state of the entertainment business. They varied in age, race, ethnicity, and gender. For 3 years, we hired nothing but women and people of color, said senior film executive, who like many leaders in the industry is a white male. He added that he did not think that some of them were able to do the jobs they got. This is not me by any means discrediting all of Hollywood's women or people of color and writing them off as forced diversity projects. As I've said before, there are very many competent and professional people in the industry who I do believe got there by their own means and hard work. However, there is a possibility that this statement rings true for at least some part of the individuals currently employed in entertainment, especially the ones that this video is dedicated to, simply based on the quality of projects from those of whom we expect the most. Of course, we can only guess whether or not this is really the case, since the article is adamant on not stating the source of this information, but again, looking at most woke projects delivered, it would not be that surprising. This video did not have a traditional intro, since I do believe it to be a continuation of my last video essay regarding feminist Hollywood, but nor will it have a traditional conclusion, simply because I find it impossible to find a closure to a subject that I believe is not mine to conclude. But nevertheless, I'll give myself a permission to express hope that one day, once I finish watching a movie that I loved, when I spot a female name in the ending credits, I don't jump out of my seat from shock and excitement, but walk out of the theater and silently but cheerfully purchase another poster that I love.